Tenta eliminar todos os 15, hein? Olha aí o primeiro. Agora, olha o segundo aí, Daniele. Presta atenção, Daniele. Olha aí o terceiro, o quarto, o quinto.
Behind this door is the video zone, a place between our world and the video dimension.
In 1992, Nickelodeon would launch Nick Arcade, a video game-themed program that was part game show and part video game. Anyone who grew up watching it still remembers it fondly, for being one of the first of its kind, a TV show dedicated to video games. It featured an energetic host and a mode that put kids in the game in real time, through the use of green screen technology that read the players as a live, real-time sprite complete with hit detection. Now, growing up in Portugal, I had never heard of Nick Arcade until watching a documentary by Wrestling with Gaming, which I highly recommend. Nick Arcade was so unique and out there upon release that in just 1 year it would actually spawn 2 very similar shows. One in Mexico and the other in Brazil. And although the Mexican Nick Arcade is somewhat known in English-speaking nations, it seems that the Brazilian version is mostly unknown just about anywhere, including in its own country. So today, we'll be taking a look at the Brazilian Nick Arcade, or as it's called over there, PlayGame, as officially this was only inspired by Nick Arcade. Yes, perhaps the worst part about the game show wasn't an issue with the show itself, but rather its name, which, as you can imagine, did not make researching it any easier. Anyway, released in 1993 in Brazil, PlayGame was a short-lived video game-themed game show that was heavily inspired by Nick Arcade. In fact, a mere look at both shows side by side will quickly reveal just how similar they both are. Not just from an aesthetic point of view like the stage design, but also in the actual challenges that the kids competed in. Both game shows have 2 teams competing for prizes, and each team is always comprised of a boy and a girl. Both games have quizzes, compete in various video games for points, control a character which leads them through their next challenge, and even enter the video games themselves in real time through green screen effects. So yeah, the similarities are evident. But what is PlayGame, and how did it come to be? PlayGame is the brainchild of Homero Salles, the then director of the Brazilian TV channel SBT, as well as TV show host Antônio Augusto Liberato, better known by his stage name Gugu Liberato. The two sought to create a video game-themed game show aimed at children, citing that we now lived in the age of Super Mario Bros. To make their vision a reality, they needed a partner with the technical and programming skills to create and handle the technological side of the show. Their search would ironically lead them towards Tectoy, who at the time was for all intents and purposes the Sega of Brazil. And it seemed like a match made in heaven. Tectoy provides the games, technology, prizes, and Sega's brand recognition, whereas SBT provides a platform, funding, and scheduling spot, a win-win for both parties. This actually gives PlayGame a decisive advantage over its American counterpart, as Nick Arcade contestants would often compete in generic games which were created specifically for that game show. But when PlayGame contestants did something similar, they would always be competing in official Sega games, ranging from Master System to Genesis titles. Not only that, but Gugu was a pretty big name in Brazilian television. He even hosted a show which entered the collective Brazilian pop culture when Jean-Claude Van Damme came on as a guest and danced samba with a popular Brazilian singer. So the stage was set to make PlayGame a runaway hit. Now, despite being clearly inspired by Nick Arcade, PlayGame had its own distinct flavor, which helped it set itself apart from its American counterpart. So why don't we check out a few of the episodes? The game show begins in a set not too dissimilar from Nick Arcade's, with 2 teams competing, both comprised of a boy and a girl. One tonal difference between shows was that PlayGame would often add these comic book style thought bubbles with jokes, heckling comments between teams, or even between the team members themselves. Anyway, the game show starts with a member from each team competing in Streets of Rage 2 to decide which team goes first. Now here's the thing. In Streets of Rage 2, you're supposed to be competing for points to decide on who wins. But these kids, they kinda play like little shits. I mean, sure, it starts out fine with the two beating up thugs for points, but in every single episode I've seen, it always evolves into them just completely ignoring the game and simply start attacking each other. Like, they don't even try to play fair. They even go as far as to make sure the other player can't get up so they cannot rack up any points. And you'd think this would be against the rules, but no! The host actually just runs with it and pushes them to keep on playing like little assholes.
Com 30 segundos de jogos, tá ganhando a 2, tá ganhando.
In fact, it's kind of amazing how often something goes wrong in this game show. Like, how about that time a kid was answering a quiz, gave the wrong answer, but the host didn't quite hear her right, so she just outright lies about her answer.
Quem foi o campeão da última Fórmula 1 no Brasil?
Senna.
Não, a primeira resposta que vale. O que você falou?
Senna.
Lying! It's the responsible thing to do.
And the host literally calls her out on live national television.
Ela falou Senna? Falou Senna? A primeira resposta que vale, ela falou pequeno, foi? Falou pequeno, não. Não, Senna seria a resposta certa. Dupla número 2.
Or how about the time one of the players tells the host to move Sonic down right and the host misunderstood it as left right and nobody corrects him? Anyway, once the starting team has been selected, kids are presented with Sonic the Hedgehog and have to pick which direction he gets to move in. This works very similarly to Mikey's World in Nick Arcade, in which the different spots the character lands on could result in a pop quiz, a prize, a game challenge, video puzzles, bonus points, or an automatic turn skip. In the pop quiz, the teams have to answer questions related to pop culture, history, sports, video games, that sort of thing. In the game challenge, they get to pick from one of 5 different Mega Drive games and are issued a challenge from Dr. Robotnik himself, whose voice is the most horrifying thing I've ever heard in a children's game show. Jesus Christ! The list of available games will change from episode to episode, but titles include Arrow Flash, Sonic 2, Alien 3, Hellfire, and yes, it also includes the best Sega Genesis game of all time, Green Dog. But man, watching how badly some of these kids play is giving me some serious Cybermaster flashbacks. At least there's no BDSM this time around. Video Challenge has the kids seeing an image or a slow-moving video and they have to guess what they're looking at. Usually it's stuff like ice cream, a teacup, dice, that sort of thing. Now, if the kids are lucky, they might land on a prize spot where they can win Sega Master System or Sega Mega Drive games. But with a few very rare exceptions, a lot of these games are let's say, of questionable quality. I mean, prizes include games like Fantasia for the Mega Drive or Tasmania and the Flintstones for the Sega Master System. And in case you're not aware, these are often considered some of the worst games on their respective systems, which kind of leads me to wonder if Tectoy was trying to dump or maybe promote unsold stock. One major difference between Nick Arcade and PlayGame is the way the host interacts with the kids. In Nick Arcade, Fillmore would speak to the kids somewhat on their level, hyping them up and adding his own insane energy into the show.
You collect comic books. What's your favorite comic book to collect?
Wolverine.
Wolverine. Yeah. Just kidding.
Gugu, on the other hand, is more like that cool uncle that brings you gifts even if he doesn't really understand what he's buying you. He'll ask questions about the kids' schools, their studies, and it's pretty obvious he does not know the first thing about gaming. But he does try to keep up with the kids. It's funny too because there's an episode in which he just keeps misnaming Streets of Rage over and over again.
Qual jogo que você mais gosta de jogar?
Street of Rage.
O Street of Rage? E qual jogo que você é bom, hein, Renato?
Street of Rage.
Também no Street of Game? É bom esse jogo, hein? Os dois gostam do Street of Game.
Anyway, once all points are accounted for, in addition to whatever games they unlocked as their prizes, the losing team also gets some t-shirts, caps, and gaming magazine subscriptions as a consolation prize. Which, yeah, not particularly enticing stuff, but whatever. The winning team, on the other hand, gets to star in the show's main attraction, that being the challenge where the kids are, as Gugu puts it, teleport inside the game, which is to say they'll be playing on a green screen with their bodies acting as the game sprites. This works very similarly to Nick Arcade, but the major difference here being that the kids will be playing official Sega games instead of games created specifically for the show. Oddly enough, there's a major focus on Master System games here, with kids competing on games like Alex Kidd in Miracle World, Shinobi World, and the Master System version of Moonwalker. In fact, I could only find one episode where they're brought into any Mega Drive games, though the image quality of that particular episode does leave a lot to be desired. Still, it is interesting how the 16-bit versions were a bit more involved, like how in Altered Beast, the kid had to grab a ball and shoot it at a specific target, or use an umbrella to reflect Lucifer shots in Ghouls and Ghosts, or both having to ride a broom in Fantasia. The team would have to go through a total of 3 green screen challenges, and with each challenge they passed, they would win a new Sega system, namely a Game Gear, Master System, and Mega Drive respectively. But if you stop to think about it though, these prizes don't really make much sense. I mean, it's already strongly implied that the kids already own at least one Sega system. At the start of each episode, Gugu literally asks them what their favorite games are and how often they spend playing games. Not to mention, both the winning and losing teams already won a few Master System and Mega Drive games before reaching this point in the competition. I swear, it's like Cybermaster all over again, where kids would win a Mega Drive despite them making it very clear that they already own the system. Except that at least in that particular show, the Mega Drive was a consolation prize. Consolation prize, get it? But then again, at least PlayGame does not have half-naked dudes and women in fetish gear strapping kids to chairs and dropping chains around them. So, you know, baby steps. And from what I've seen, it does seem that kids will always win at least one game console. And it actually wasn't that uncommon to see a team winning all 3 systems. Which is kind of surprising considering how janky the movement is in some of these games. That's one thing that I feel Nick Arcade did better. The movement and your hitbox made sense. But here, it's all really kinda janky. Another interesting thing is how some of these challenges feature different level design than the official games they stemmed from, meaning that these were reworked for the game show. According to an interview with Alexandre Pagano, who was a developer at Tectoy during this time, getting the green screen effect to work was relatively easy. But they couldn't really get the hit detection to work properly, so instead what they did was run the game with slightly altered level design, make the main character invisible, and the Tectoy engineer or production member would have a controller on hand and move the game's main character according to the kid's own movements. Yes, they literally had some dude playing the game with a controller who was trying to sync his character's movements to what the kids were doing on screen. That is adorable! It's adorable! Yeah, it's kinda weird, but hey, it worked, so who am I to judge? And I gotta say, PlayGame looks like a really fun game show. If this had aired in my country when I was a kid, I'm pretty sure I'd tune in to watch it. But sadly, the truth is that PlayGame only aired for 5 months between May and September of 1993, and there's very little information about it. I couldn't even find how many episodes were produced. In fact, if you check its Wikipedia page, you'll quickly see how barren it is. I've spoken with a few Brazilian gamers about the game show, and it seems that PlayGame was popular when it launched, but it did not last long enough to build an enduring fanbase. In fact, the show was not cancelled due to low ratings, but because Tectoy did not have the manpower to keep creating new green screen levels. Yes, the level design was only slightly altered and the main characters were made invisible and invulnerable, but doing this still required some level of programming, and the TV show's production wanted new levels and new games on a near constant basis, and Tectoy could not keep up with that pacing, and in the end this is what sealed PlayGame's fate. And that's a shame too, because I'd love to have seen more episodes of this. And as far as I know, as of the making of this video, there are no discussions about a PlayGame revival. And that's a shame too, because from what I've seen in interviews, Gugu really enjoyed working on this project. I mean, sure, he wasn't a gamer, but he loved how the kids would become genuinely excited to be on the show. And to this day, Gugu is considered something of a national treasure in Brazil. Sadly though, if PlayGame is to ever return, it will be without him, as Gugu Liberato passed away in 2019. Leaving a trail of TV shows and entertainment in Brazil. As for PlayGame, the game show may never return, but there are a few episodes freely available on YouTube, though the higher quality videos are region locked. So you better get that VPN ready. And no, this video is not sponsored by any VPN. But it could be. Still, if you're interested in seeing what Nick Arcade could have looked like in an alternate dimension, I think it's worth tracking down an episode or two of PlayGame and just sit down and enjoy how adorable it was. Hey everyone, thank you for watching SteelKids Retro Corner. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell and share this video. All that fun social media stuff. And you can also support me on Patreon. It may not seem like it, but even $1 is a really big help in keeping this channel going. I also want to thank my newest Patreon supporter, Mike Lutyens. Anyway, I hope you have a great day. Bye!
Lying! It's the responsible thing to do.